What do Kane, White and Messi have in common? Well, full disclosure, I am no football expert, but I know they are all legendary strikers. But we can't all be the striker in our profession of choice, and nor do we all want to be. That is one of the topics in today's conversation. We are meeting with Arron, who is a practice director at a barrister's chambers in the judiciary industry in the UK. Arron shares with us all about his area of expertise, his career journey, and his great advice too. We also talk about how to manage difficult conversations, why business development doesn't need to be scary, the benefit of part-time jobs and the like for developing those soft skills, and diversity, equity and inclusion in chambers and what they are doing to bridge the gap. And of course, we talk about the power of collaboration and teamwork, because just like football, we win as a team. If that sounds good to you, fantastic. Arron and I will see you in the show. Enjoy. Hi, Arron. Welcome to the show. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks for having me on. I'm excited to tell you a bit about my career and my journey over the last 25 years.
Fantastic. Thank you. Well, why don't you kick off by telling us who you are, what you do, and how long you've been doing it for?
Sure. My name is Arron Zipfer. I am a practice director, also previously known as a Barristers Clerk. I have been in the profession for 25 years now. My 25-year anniversary was on the 1st of April this year. Thank you very much. It's been an interesting career so far, and hopefully many years ahead. And hopefully the viewers and listeners will take an interest and possibly think about a career as a practice director, practice manager, or barrister's clerk.
Fantastic. Thank you. Now, Arron, this is a podcast. So tell us if you're someone that enjoys podcasts, and if so, what are you enjoying right now?
Sure. You're very much so, Joe. I am a big podcast fan. I listen to a number of them. Probably the ones I listen to most is ones that include things that I can relate to. There is one in particular called The Wall for Now, which is hosted by a couple of comedians. Romesh Ranganathan and I can't remember the name of the other chap now. Another well-known comedian who's also written a number of TV shows. That's one that I listen to on a regular basis. There's also one called The Modern Man by a chap called Ollie Mann, who it's quite an unusual show because it covers a number of genres. Including they have a sort of regular lifestyle type section where they interview somebody that's gone through something traumatic. They had somebody that was attacked by an alligator and how that trauma affected their life. They also had somebody who was involved in a very horrific car accident and how that affected their life. So that's quite interesting. Some of the other ones I listen to on a regular basis is Parenting Hell. That was set up during lockdown, so that was quite interesting. People dealing with their children while they were locked up. And probably the last one I'll mention is one called What's Upset You Now, and again that's another couple of comedians that just have reached a certain point in life where they like to have a moan on a regular basis, but all very entertaining and worth listening to on a run or a cycle, or walking into the office.
Oh, thank you for sharing those. I've only heard of Parenting Hell, courtesy of my sister, and she loves that. But I have listened to a couple of the episodes, even though I don't have kids myself. And I really liked the episode with Hugo Monnier when he was speaking about his journey. So, yeah, great recommendations. Thank you. Okay, Arron, practice director. So many misconceptions about what we do. So I'm wondering what misconceptions there are about your role. So what do your friends and family think you're doing all day?
I'm not quite sure, and I'm not even sure my wife or my children really have much of an idea about what I do. I obviously speak to a number of people in my own position, or similar positions in chambers, and we have a number of conversations about how we describe our role to people that don't really do it or don't understand it or haven't come into contact with a barrister's clerk, or practice director or practice manager. So there's a number of different titles. Traditionally, we were known as barristers clerks, and that covered from top to bottom. So at the very top of the pyramid, you would traditionally have a senior clerk, and then you would have a deputy senior clerk, and then everybody else traditionally would just be called a clerk. Now, most modern chambers, certainly in the area of law we practice, which is commercial, have different job titles. Practice manager, practice director at the top tend to be the most common. There are a few other titles that people use, but the way I generally describe our role, it's a bit like being an agent, either a theatrical agent, because we are basically managing the practices of people that are advocates, and are appearing before courts and tribunals on a regular basis. So that's probably the easiest way to describe the role. But it also encompasses a number of other strands, and that includes things like, coming up with things like business plans for particular practice areas, marketing, business development, both here in the UK and overseas. A number of chambers have overseas offices now. We have had our Singapore office for 13 years. So I tend to do a couple of trips a year there. We're also particularly active in places like Hong Kong. I've also got a trip coming up there later this year, and also Middle East, places like Dubai, and then closer to home, Greece is quite an active region for us as well.
Wow, thank you. And actually, that's a really nice way of describing it like that. I like that talent agent analogy because, the talent is the barrister, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's correct. And obviously, they've all got very different personalities. And part of my role, or part of the role of a barrister's clerk / practice manager, is to find the right person for a particular job. And it's sometimes a matter of us matching personalities, or people that have experience in particular areas. And that happens on a very regular basis. We'll often be asked about a new instruction that has a very particular requirement. They want expertise in a particular area of law, and then they're drilling down to that. They want to know that somebody's done a case that's pretty much exactly like their case. It's not always possible, but sometimes it is. The other request we have on a very regular basis is for some of the language skills. We have barristers that speak most popular languages, lots of people that speak Spanish. We've got Mandarin speakers, Italian speakers, French speakers. Most of our bases are covered, and we've also got a number of people that are qualified in different jurisdictions as well.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Thank you. So if somebody like me doesn't know a ton about how the barristers' chambers fits into the overall legal landscape, can you kind of give us a sense of where it fits in? I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, I mean, traditionally, Joe, we're a referral profession.
Okay.
And by that, I mean that our work traditionally never came directly from the lay client. So that's the end client, basically the person paying the bill.
Okay.
That has changed in recent years. Members of the public are now able to instruct barristers directly. There's a number of schemes in which you're able to instruct barristers directly. Because of the type of work we do, generally we're still instructed by a law firm. So what will happen day to day, we will have an inquiry from a law firm, either here in the UK or from somewhere else in the world, and they will say we need a barrister with X amount of years of experience. This is the case. These are the hearing dates. and who have you got available. Occasionally, we will receive instructions directly from a lay client, but the vast majority of the time, it's via a law firm. And obviously, we then build up strong relationships with those law firms because, we're speaking to the same people on a pretty regular basis.
Yeah, that makes sense. And in terms of receiving an instruction from a lay client, would that be because they're trying to save money by not going through a law firm, or for a different reason?
Sometimes that is the case. They're looking for a cost saving, and they think by cutting out a law firm that might save them money. But generally speaking, we are not able to offer a number of the services that law firms provide, certainly in terms of support. Putting together hearing bundles and those sort of tasks, and filing documents with the court, we're just not in a position to do. So for small advisory pieces of work, it's not so much of an issue. We are quite happy to receive instructions direct from lay clients. But if it's a hearing of any substance, say for more than a day's worth of hearing time, it's far more practical for us to be instructed by a law firm because they have a big support team. They have people that can put together bundles, all of those extra bolt-on services that barristers' chambers don't have.
Yeah, I see. Would one of your barristers go to the hearing with one of the law firm's solicitors typically, and that's almost the team representing the client?
Yes, they're acting on behalf. The law firm, the solicitor at the law firm is acting on behalf of the client. But sometimes lay clients will also attend court hearings, especially if they have to give evidence, which does happen. They are quite often, cross-examined, which is obviously one of the key skills of a barrister, and one of the bits of their role that they enjoy the most. Obviously, it's a skill you need to practice on a regular basis, but it's one that they really enjoy doing, and it's a great art, and it's worth seeing. There's a number of opportunities to watch advocacy online now, and a number of the courts actually stream hearings live as they happen. Even as high up as the Supreme Court have a streaming service. So for anybody interested in the law, either as a practice manager, practice director, or becoming a solicitor or a barrister themselves, it's certainly worth having a look at those, and they're all available online.
Yeah, see them in action.
Indeed.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. I've got to ask, what is a lay client?
So a lay client is the person who is basically both picking up the bill, paying the fees, and the person that's making the instruction. So they are the person that needs the assistance. So the lay client could be the company we're acting for, and most of our work is acting for companies rather than individuals. But obviously, if you were talking about a different area of law, you would probably be talking about an individual. So certainly if it was in the area of crime or employment, you'd be acting for an individual, but they would still be regarded as the lay client.
Okay, thank you. Very helpful. And then the other thing I just want to cover while we're talking about the industry is you mentioned that your barristers' chambers do commercial work. What type of work might other barristers' chambers do?
So there's a number of specialist sets. Some of the sets are bigger than others, so I should probably just to give everybody an overview. So my particular set is 20 Essex. We're a commercial barristers' chambers. Lots of international arbitration and work in the High Court. But in terms of practice areas, the areas we cover predominantly, and this isn't the entire list, but this will just give you a flavour of the type of disputes we see on a regular basis. So shipping, insurance, tech disputes, and that includes crypto, which is quite a big area at the moment, civil fraud, again, a big area, practice area at the moment, insolvency, banking, EU and competition law, energy, and public international. And then that's broadly the areas of law that we cover as a set. But generally speaking, anything involving a contract, we could advise on, or we've worked on. We've had a number of cases involving sports law, quite a bit of media law. For example, where concerts have been cancelled at the last minute, or sporting events have been cancelled at the last minute. So they're the types of disputes we regularly get involved in. Some of the other sets will cover things like there's a specialist tax bar, and they only really do work involving tax. There's a number of media barristers chambers, obviously acting for and against the newspapers, which is quite an interesting area of law.
They're busy at the moment.
Indeed. I think they're always busy. There's a number of specialist employment law sets. Any of the types of disputes that crop up on a regular basis that solicitors see, barristers tend to be involved in. Obviously, you have the family type disputes. There's a number of sets that operate in that area as well. Human rights. Anything you can possibly think of. Landlord and tenant. There's a number of specialist sets that deal in that type of work. Construction. There's a number of sets that only really do construction work. And obviously that's quite global as well. It's set next door to us, Keating Chambers. They do a lot of construction and energy type disputes.
Okay. Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you. All right. So if you were to have to sum up in a couple of sentences the purpose of your role as practice director, how would you sum it up?
Oh, good question. I suppose to sum up, my role is to make the barristers' lives easier day to day, so they don't have to think too much about the diary management. Is quite a big part of our role. We can direct them into marketing opportunities, but ultimately we still need the barristers to be involved in those and to be willing and eager to be involved in those opportunities. So I guess the other part of our role is obviously to create business opportunities for the barristers. And we are effectively the middle people between barristers and solicitors, generally speaking, and we try and make the relationship work as nicely as possible. The barristers don't deal with any of their own fees, for example. That's all dealt with by me and my colleagues, and that helps the solicitor barrister relationship because they don't have to have any of those slightly awkward discussions. We can just leave their relationship to be purely professional about the case without any distractions, and that's quite a big part of our role. Also, we are a sounding board for the barristers. Obviously, there are lots of emotions. There's highs and lows being a barrister, and part of our role is a support role to help the barristers, to manage workload or difficult situations that do sometimes arise. It's plain sailing a lot of the time, but not absolutely all of the time. It's quite stressful situations for a lot of the barristers, especially if you're talking about really lengthy hearings, 4 or 5 week hearings. Once you've seen the barrister at the beginning of that hearing, and then at week 4 or 5, you can see the stress levels. You can really see that it's taken quite a lot out of them, and it is quite a draining role. Obviously, they're speaking for a vast majority of the day. They're having to think about the case, 12, 14, 15 hours a day. So it can be quite tough on them. Our role is to try and see those times where they're struggling a bit, and just try and even if it's sometimes it's a 5-minute conversation, just say, "Are you okay? Is there anything I can do to make life a little bit easier for you?" And sometimes they need to decompress a little bit, and they might say, "Let's go grab a quick coffee." Even though they haven't got time, they just need somebody to talk to, a shoulder to cry on, and just have those conversations that they might not have had the opportunity to have during the hearing because all of their all of their interactions are with people that are paying their bill, and they don't feel comfortable doing that. So it is a very wide-ranging role. There isn't too much we're not asked to do, but it's fun and it's very varied. I think is the key. One day is never the same as another. And it's purely the best thing about the role for me is probably the international aspect. I deal with people all over the globe on a daily basis. I can speak to people from the US 1 minute, and then I'm on the phone to somebody from Hong Kong, Singapore, Dubai, anywhere in Europe you can think of. It's purely international, and that's the fun part of the job, getting to meet lots of different people from different backgrounds.
All right, thank you. So if we were to zoom in on an average day or week, what would we find you doing?
You would find me doing a variety of tasks. I will. Part of my role is dealing with the day-to-day inquiries that come in, and we have numerous opportunities that come through on a regular basis. Discussing barristers' fees is quite a big part of the role, and then the strategic side. Working on business plans, coming up with marketing strategies. Events, there's a number of events that keeps us very busy. International travel, BD, a number of trips that we organise for barristers and attend ourselves. Managing my more junior colleagues, and various discussions, about the best way to do particular tasks. Talking to the barristers about their practice management reviews, which happen on a regular basis, just to talk to the barristers about what they've been enjoying doing, what they'd like to do more of, what their targets are. Broadly speaking, but there is a number of unusual tasks that come up on a weekly basis.
All right. And what's the kind of the look of where you're based? So in the office, at home, do you go to court yourself? How does that work?
The setup is I tend to work at practice directors at our particular chambers work at home twice a week. Generally, sometimes it's slightly more, sometimes it's slightly less. It depends on business needs. Some weeks I'm actually in 5 days a week. It just depends what's going on. And obviously, if I'm travelling for business, then I'm working away from the jurisdiction for days or weeks at a time. And then, generally speaking, 3 days in the office. Our office, our current office, we've had since 1996 or 7, I believe. We've expanded over the years. When I joined Chambers 25 years ago, we were 30 odd members of Chambers. We're now 88, soon to be bursting through the 90. We are increasing on a regular basis, so much so that we've taken the building next door to us, and that's currently being refurbished at the moment, and that's just so that we're able to do more of those seminar events in chambers rather than having to hire external venues, and also finding rooms for the barristers, because all of our barristers actually have a room. A few of them share rooms, but predominantly everybody has their own individual room.
Oh, that's interesting. Thank you. And do you go to court yourself ever, Arron?
I used to on a pretty regular basis. So the role is split between what people would describe it as the senior table, and by that I mean clerks or practice managers, practice directors that are client facing. And then you have another table in the same room, generally for most chambers, of junior clerks. The junior clerk's role is slightly different to my role. I was a junior clerk when I first joined Chambers, and after a few years of doing that, and that's basically the apprenticeship type time of one's career in the profession. And what their role is slightly more physical. So it's getting barristers to court, so taking their
Right, okay.
bundles, their papers, their books to court, getting them there, photocopying, more day-to-day admin type role.
Yeah.
So they're in court, attending court on a regular basis. The other role that I used to do more of is fixing hearings in court. Or there tends to be listing offices where you'll go. Each division of the High Court, for example, has its own listing office. So there's a number of people that work in those offices. So what will happen is, if a case is ready to be fixed, a clerk will meet their opposing number, so the clerk that's acting for the other side's counsel, and then you will go to court and discuss possible dates for the hearing. It sounds straightforward in theory. Sometimes it can be quite confrontational. And basically the listing officer will hear both sides of view, and if a date can't be agreed, what will happen is both clerks will have their opportunity to say their piece about why the hearing is urgent, or it's not urgent, or it should be fixed for this person's availability rather than this person's availability. And then the listing officer will generally make a decision about when the hearing is listed for. If the listing officer is not comfortable making that decision, he will sometimes refer it to a judge for a decision. And then once the judge has made his decision, that's binding, and the date will be fixed whenever the judge has directed it to be so.
Yeah. What I really like about this model is, in so many organisations, you have a role where you're wearing very many hats. And actually, I think your role is probably quite similar to that. But it does sound like the barristers have a good setup where they are literally outsourcing everything except the barrister's work, so that they're able to fully concentrate on that work. So you can see why they need a chambers.
That's absolutely right. That does make a big difference to their day-to-day. I often have conversations with solicitor clients where we're explaining that, Barrister X is going to be spending 10, 12 hours every day for the next 5 days, and sometimes they will question me and say, well, how's that possible? How can they possibly bill 12 hours in any given day? And then you have to have that explanation. Say, look, because of my role, we're able to, leave them in peace the majority of the time, so that they can really get on with the workload. And obviously, solicitors have different types of role. They have a lot of internal management type discussions. They're just set up in a very different way. They have to do all their own business development, where we are there to assist and direct and point them in the right direction to save them quite a lot of time. So our role is pretty critical. I mean, it's once been said that a good clerk pays for themselves, and I think that's absolutely true still to this day.
Yeah, it feels like a real team effort.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Okay, so Arron, if we zoom out a little bit, are there any responsibilities that you have as part of your role that come up less frequently throughout the year that are important to mention?
Less frequent. Nothing springs to mind. Less frequent. I can't think of anything, Jo.
Okay.
To be completely honest.
Yeah, that's okay. But what I'm hearing is, you know, there's a lot of business development, there's a lot of negotiation, there's a lot of being, that partner in crime, no pun intended. Yeah, it sounds like a really varied role.
Absolutely, yeah. I think that's what attracts a lot of people to it. I mean, the other thing about the role, the important thing, and one of the reasons I was keen to come on, it's still one of those professions. And by coincidence, I was discussing this with somebody yesterday, that so many people haven't heard about. And indeed, I hadn't heard about the profession until a friend of mine got a job in chambers 25 years ago, or would have been 26, 27 years ago when he joined, and explained the role to me. But before that, I had very little idea about it. So it is one of those roles that, unless you know somebody, it's unlikely you're going to have much of an understanding about the role. And indeed, lots of clerks know other clerks because they've been introduced to the profession via them. There's quite a few family members. You'll find a number of people that are related to other clerks within chambers, brothers, fathers, sisters, what have you. So there's a lot of connection, and that's how a lot of clerks traditionally got into the role, because they knew people that were already in the role.
Yeah. Well, and that's actually one of the reasons that I wanted to do this podcast, because if you don't know a job exists, how can you decide that's what you want to do, right?
Absolutely. And that's key to look when you're considering any career. There's so many more careers out there than people could possibly imagine, and to give people a small insight into what I think is a great career, and if I could have my time again, would I become a clerk again? Probably yes. I think I would. On the whole, it's interesting and it's varied, and as we've discussed, one day is never the same as another.
Yeah. All right. So, Arron, on that note, tell us what you love about your role.
As I mentioned earlier, I really enjoy the international aspects, and I enjoy meeting people from very many different walks of life. I've met very senior law lords. I work with a number of some of our arbitrator members are ex Lord Justices of Appeal. It's super varied. I know a number of High Court judges that were former members of chambers, and having those sort of connections. If I wasn't in this profession, I don't think I would have had the opportunity to meet those types of people. So that is really interesting. Also, just meeting different lawyers from around the world, seeing their insights and hearing about different places to live. It is really interesting, just to get a different outlook. Speaking to people that operate in different practice areas have got a completely different outlook on life, which is really interesting to hear about. And obviously, getting insights into how companies are run, and seeing what sort of things go wrong on a regular basis. And some of the disputes we're involved in, obviously I can't mention any great detail because a lot of it is confidential, but there's some really interesting things that go wrong. Certainly on the civil fraud side, a number of these claims are very interesting, involving very high profile individuals. So it's probably what I enjoy most, and obviously the opportunity for me to travel and see parts of the world otherwise I wouldn't have seen. Numerous trips to Singapore over the years. I feel like I've built up a network of professional contacts there, and the lines sometimes blur because these people so well, about their families, about their personal lives, and they almost get to the stage where they're like long lost friends that you haven't seen for a while. Obviously, you're not seeing them on a weekly basis, but seeing them a couple of times of the year, it's really nice to have those interactions. And I think that's generally what business development. It can be quite simple. It's all about building relationships, and that's probably what I value most within my role. It's the opportunity to build relationships and rapport with people. The best thing, or the most enjoyable thing, when I hear from an old client I haven't heard from for a while, and they say, "Oh, I've been meaning to get in touch. I've got this new opportunity, and by the way, when are you next in town? It'd be lovely to see you." So that's the bit I enjoy. I enjoy the interaction with people, and not being tied to a desk 5 days a week, because that's really not the role any longer.
Yeah. I think on that note of business development, I think when people hear that term, they can feel a bit fearful of it. But like you say, it is just getting to know people and building relationships with people. And we all do that every day in our lives. So just because it's labelled business development, it somehow feels scary.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you're right, and I think it's okay to show a bit of personality when you're meeting people. It's okay to try and be authentic and not be somebody else. Because that can become very draining very quickly. If you've got a quirky sense of humour, um, if your outlook on life is a little different, providing you can still remain professional, I think it's okay to show some of that when you're meeting people. It probably makes you more memorable to clients. People don't want to interact with robots. The same as people don't want to instruct barristers that are just doing the job without any of the niceties. It's no great surprise that some of our most successful barristers are the people that have charisma and personality, and you kind of get a sense that that's what they're like throughout their entire life, both professionally and personally. You're kind of seeing their true self, but remaining professional at all times. I think, as I say, it's okay to show some personality.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, people buy from people at the end of the day, don't they? They don't buy from
indeed
company brands.
Absolutely,
right.
Absolutely.
And Arron, I've got to ask, and I don't know if this is the right terminology, but when the barrister phones you and says, "We won," is that a good feeling in the office?
Generally speaking, yes. And a number of the barristers will come in and tell us about their day and their successes. But in a chambers like mine, and not everybody will know this, we often have barristers acting against each other within the same chambers. That's quite a regular occurrence. So there are some, on occasion, there are cases where chambers can't really lose because we're on both sides. But equally, you'll obviously feel sorry for the losing party, and we set up information barriers in chambers. So we'll have cases that I clerk a particular side, and one of my colleagues will look after one of the other opposing sides, and we'll obviously tell people that are involved in that case that there's an information barrier within chambers. But those, you can't win them all, unfortunately. And no barrister, no matter how brilliant they are, or solicitor or lawyer, will win every case. It's just not realistic. I think that probably the key for running a case is to know when you've got a strong one, and to push ahead, and equally to know your limitations when you've got a case that doesn't look quite so strong. And all of my barristers will have a very good feeling for how successful they're likely to be for a particular hearing. So they will advise the client that the chances of success might be limited on for this particular case. But sometimes it's a point of principle, and the lay client doesn't care about losing money. They want their day in court or arbitration. Win or lose, they just want the opportunity to see the other side in the witness box.
Yeah. Oh, I feel like I'm going to have to get on that streaming service you mentioned, because I want to see it all in action now.
Definitely worth a watch. And obviously, a lot of people will have seen TV shows like Silk, where you get an idea where there's a clerking role. They're worth watching, but it's not that realistic. It might be more realistic for the criminal sets of chambers, but certainly in my particular practice area that my chambers covers, it's not really how it operates day to day. And one of the nicest things about my clerk's room is that we all get along very well. There's 9 of us on the senior table, and we all rub along together very nicely. We all have a very good relationship. It can be quite a stressful role, and you need colleagues that understand how a day's interaction might affect you. People to discuss potential problems or ways of doing things, and it's just great having that level of support. It makes a big difference.
Yeah, Absolutely.
And I think that's probably what some of the barristers potentially struggle with a little bit. Some of them are better than others, but they are sole traders. They are individuals. Yeah. They do often work as part of a team with other barristers, but a lot of the time they'll be working in a room on their own all day. It can be quite tough if you haven't got somebody to share those problems with, and that's, as I mentioned earlier, it's part of our role is to be a sounding board if somebody's going through a difficult time.
Yeah. All right. Thanks. So, Arron, tell us about the toughest parts of your role.
The toughest parts. I mean, occasionally we will have irate solicitors that will be upset with something somebody has done. Occasionally there will be a deadline might be we might need to adjust a deadline for a document to be filed. Some of those conversations are very easy, but some of them are slightly tricky. Occasionally I've been shouted at by a client because I've delivered news that they don't want to hear. That can be quite tough. Occasionally you just have to deliver news that that is not going to be well received. It could be that Barrister X, their favourite barrister, isn't available for a hearing date when they thought they might be available, and those sort of conversations can be slightly tricky, but that's just the reality of the role. Unfortunately, the drawback of being a sole trader for the barristers is only one of them. So managing workflow and diaries can sometimes be tricky. And if you can't provide a particular barrister to a client that particularly wants that individual, they can be quite disappointed. What sometimes will happen is they've already done the sales pitch on our behalf to their client to say, you must instruct Barrister X, and they phone me and is Barrister X available? Sorry, no, he's not. He's in a 3-month hearing. They can be terribly disappointed. But that generally speaking, things run pretty smoothly on the whole.
Yeah. No one likes being shouted at. I've been shouted at in the past, and I think that managing difficult conversations is a skill. So can you perhaps give us a bit of insight into how you manage those, and maybe how you, coach your junior clerks to manage those types of conversations?
Yeah, indeed, Jo. I think the key skill for dealing with people that are upset or frustrated is to listen. Try not to interject with your viewpoint straight away. Actually spend the time listening. If somebody's actually screaming and shouting at you, I don't think it's unreasonable to say, could you please call me back when you've calmed down? It doesn't always go down particularly well, but I think it's worth an effort, because you're not going to have a constructive conversation if somebody's shouting at you down the phone, or if somebody's not too far away in terms of distance. I would be tempted to say, look, you're only 10 minutes down the road. Let's go and grab a coffee, or I'll come into your office for a chat. That's quite a good way to try and diffuse the situation. People are less likely to be so irate if they're on home turf. So I think that works quite well. Occasionally, sometimes involving others. You might say, well, let's do a Teams or Zoom call with somebody else involved. Almost an impartial person to back you up or offer a different view if they're not happy with the way things are running. Those sort of skills are important, and I think the key thing is listening. That makes a big difference. Not just firing out your views over the top of them screaming and shouting, because that doesn't work.
Yeah, and I think don't take it personally. I think it's another good
I think that's
tip, isn't
very
it?
wise. And it's normally not about the situation. It's normally another frustration in their life that's spilled over, and you just happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Yeah.
And the vast majority of the time when somebody has reacted in a way I wouldn't have expected, I've generally got an apology the next time I've seen them, or they might have phoned me the next day. Or I had one particular example where I was in it was on a weekend, and I was dealing with a particularly tricky situation, and I was in the car, and my children were in the back. I think I was just about to wander around the supermarket, and somebody was really going into one, and I had to explain, I'm in the car, I'm with my children.
Yeah.
Can we discuss this later? And then as soon as I put the phone down, I got an written apology straight away over a WhatsApp message, because obviously that sort of diffused the situation. Obviously, you don't always have your children to rely on, but sometimes it helps to humanize situations. And people tend to then try and treat you like a human being rather than somebody that can be shouted at.
Yeah. And it's always a good feeling when they end up becoming one of your best clients or stakeholders, isn't it?
Exactly.
When you manage to turn it around.
Exactly. And you normally can. Most people don't want to be difficult. They might have had a bad day. It's just part of human nature, I think.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. Arron, when you look back at your 25-year career in Chambers, what kind of stands out as the proudest moment for you?
Probably personally, obviously, I started as the very most junior clerk. So day one, 1st of April 1998, I was taking people to court, pushing trolleys, which is a skill in itself. When you might, if anybody's been around near the Strand or the Rolls building, which is just down the road, you'll often see people pushing, a number of big boxes, and that's quite a tough experience, and it's quite physically demanding, and on a regular basis you'd be walking so much that you'd be wearing shoes out on a almost a weekly basis, because there was lots of running around, and people don't expect to be waiting for things, so there's a lot of that. So I've seen a number of promotions during my 25 years. So obviously rising up through the ranks of the junior clerks was sort of the first stage of that, and then probably the biggest jump was from junior clerk to a clerk on the table, where I was in that role for a number of years, and then promoted to deputy senior clerk, and then to my current role as practice director. So that's probably for me personally, and then professionally, in terms of barrister success, I've seen a number of the barristers that started pretty much at the same time as me through the pupillage process, and then go on to take silk. And I've had the pleasure of taking a number of those people to the silk ceremony in Westminster to see them sworn in. So that's been a very proud experience over the years of seeing a number of people do that. So yeah, that probably covers it.
Yeah, thank you. And I am just going to have to ask, what does take silk mean?
So when a barrister, so it's an application process. So you have to apply to the King's Council, as it now was Queen's Council, now King's Council. And as you can imagine, on the day the Queen passed away, we had to make some pretty quick updates to our website, because with immediate effect they became KCs rather than QCs. Still sounds a bit odd to me, after 20 odd years of calling them all QCs. So it's a formal process where you have to apply to the KCA panel. It's a written application form to demonstrate your excellence in particular areas, including but not limited to advocacy and written skills. And then if you're successful at the first stage, you're then invited to an interview, and then if you get through the interview process, you're then awarded Silk or KC.
Okay, right. That's fab. Thank you. All right.
So it's
Arron.
basically like a kite mic for barristers, in effect.
Yeah. So it's the very top of the game. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for sharing. That's great. So, Arron, I want to go back all the way to the beginning. When you were a kid, what did you want to be when you grew up?
It's a tricky one. I'm not really sure I had that much of an idea about what I wanted to do. What I was trying to think recently before discussing review, what I would say, what my answer would be to this particular question. I know at one stage I was quite interested in joining the police force. And then at one stage I thought about becoming an estate agent, which I suppose has a few similarities, but not too many, because I did some work experience at estate agents and found it quite interesting. And then I've always quite liked numbers. So at one stage I thought about progressing that, in terms of accountancy or something along those lines. But I never really had a clear path, to be completely honest. After school, I did a GMVQ in business, and one of those, one of the modules was actually law. So it kind of did get me. It sparked an interest, and then when my friend who's now at 7 Bedford Road, Paul Hills, told me about the role, I had some understanding. I had heard of the role, and then it kind of progressed from there.
Yeah. And how did he hear about the role?
He had a friend who was also a clerk, and I think his dad was a clerk.
Okay.
So it's a slightly unusual profession. Everybody knows everybody pretty much. And one of the nice things about my position now after 25 years is that I walk down the street and I know most people, and it's quite heartwarming on my way into work when I end up losing count of saying hello to people. And I really value that, and I really like that part of the role. Some people might think it sounds a little bit boring, having been somewhere for 25 years. Most people now don't really they might stick at particular careers, but it's unusual for people to spend so long in a particular place. But I really like that familiarity. And it's still one of those professions where people do tend to stick around a little bit longer than most. There's not really a traditional life cycle. I understand from people in marketing roles, they tend to stick around for around 5 years and then move on to a different project because they might get bored or look for a new challenge. But I found the challenge kind of has moved with me as I've progressed through the ranks, and I still see challenges ahead now. The business has changed quite a lot, but also I have a number of colleagues that have been around for a long time as well. One of the other practice directors in Chambers, Chris, is 20 years plus. Our other practice director, and he's been around 5 years plus now. So people are getting more years under their belt, but it is unusual. But it's quite usual for the role of a barrister's clerk to stick in a particular chambers for a number of years.
Yeah, and I like what you're describing about walking down the street and all these people from over the years. And for anyone who doesn't know, in London there's a particular area where I'm guessing all the chambers are, right? And that's why you see the same sort of people again and again.
That's correct. So our chambers, we're just outside Middle Temple, outside Temple. There's a number of inns where traditionally chambers are based. As the chambers have got bigger, they've needed bigger premises. There's a number of sets that have had to move out, but they're still pretty close by. So we are just outside, it's just more of a spacing issue. The slight disadvantage of being in one of the inns, they're very old buildings. They're hundreds and hundreds of years old, so they don't have many mod cons. Some of them don't have air conditioning. Some of the buildings don't even have lifts, and they're 4 or 5 floors up. And if you've got to get things around, it becomes
all those
pretty
boxes.
tricky. And they're not very exactly. So they're freezing cold in the winter and boiling hot in the summer. But it's beautiful. I mean, I had I met with one of my barristers and a few of my colleagues last Thursday evening outside Middle Temple Church, and probably everybody that's watching or listening to this will have seen that church on TV, because they do quite a lot of TV filming around there. I know it was on MasterChef quite recently, because I saw one of the hosts out there with some of the MasterChef contestants. But they have a sort of beautiful fountain. It's a very nice location. They set up a bar on a Thursday evening, and it's a nice place to be.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Thank you. So when your friend told you about the clerking role, what was it about it that made you think, oh, maybe I might like that? Maybe I might be quite good at that.
Yeah. I think it was just the variety and the interaction with people, and people from different backgrounds. Just really sparked something in me. He would often tell me about the personalities of some of the barristers he worked with, and it just sounded really interesting. And the opportunity to see people in court and undertaking advocacy, and seeing people doing something they're absolutely brilliant at. It is really exciting, and it just gets the creative flow going. Really, I just think seeing somebody at their peak, doing something they obviously love, you can't help but be excited by that. I mean, one of my barristers has the most wonderful outlook. He by all rights, in a normal profession, he would probably have retired by now. But he loves it so much. He's told me a few times, and I would never tell this to a client, but he said, I would do this job for free. I absolutely love it. And there's not many professions you can work in where people are so passionate about it. And equally, I get to see people throughout their whole career and life. I've seen barristers that have been very successful at the bar, practicing as a barrister. They go off and they're elevated to the bench, so they become judges, and then they come back to chambers after they retire and become arbitrators. So I've known some of these people for most of my career, and I've seen them in all three of the different roles a barrister and then judge can do. And it's it's really enlightening. And obviously financially they don't need to do it, but they do it because they really love it. And that's quite infectious, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you get the job in the chambers, so you're, I don't know, a few weeks in, few months in, at what point do you think, yeah, I really like it? It's as good as he told me it was. I feel like I can see myself here long term.
Oh, yeah, that is a tricky one, because it did take, in all honesty, it took a while. It took a while. On day one, I was very unsure. I thought, what have I done? Because it was one of those days where there was a lot of manual lifting, there was a lot of trolley pushing, and I wasn't quite sure if I made the right decision. I thought, this is very hard work. I have to commute into London. The salary wasn't great to start with, and I wasn't 100% sure. And then I distinctly remember, so I started in April, and then it would have been December, salary reviews. And I remember having a conversation. Two of our well-known silks, one of them's on the bench now, at the very highest level, told me my salary increase. And I remember being a little disappointed. So shortly after that meeting, I spoke to our chambers manager, and then I spoke to our head of chambers at the time, and I explained that I was disappointed. And then I think the next day he pulled me into his office and said, "We've doubled the increase. I hope you're happy with that." And then, sort of from that moment onwards, I know it was I felt it was a chambers that would listen to me, most importantly, and B, look after me, and try and keep me happy, providing I was performing. And I think I've always performed, ever since. But equally, I value being valued, and that makes a big difference.
Yeah. Well, I'm really curious. What gave you the confidence to have those conversations at, I'm guessing, 18, 19? Because there's many that wouldn't dare have that conversation as grown-up adults today.
Interesting, actually. What I could say, I had some life experience before. So I joined Chambers. I was 17, just about to turn 18 when I joined. But I'd actually worked with my father for a number of years. He was a milkman.
Okay.
So at a young age, I spent quite a lot of time interacting with members of the public, and I think that really helped to build up my confidence levels. And certainly even talking about money, because I was obviously asking people for money to pay for their bills, and I think that just probably helped with my interactions. And then I was interacting generally with members of the public, but also interacting with some of my father's colleagues, and I think that just kind of helped me to come out of my shell. And I think that worked quite nicely as a role in Chambers. Those sort of soft skills have really been invaluable, and I'd encourage anybody at a young age, before they start their careers, to think about the opportunities to interact with members of the public, be it part-time jobs or even volunteering, just to build up the confidence levels and just get used to talking to people, and not be afraid to have those slightly awkward conversations, because I tend to find 9 times out of 10, those really difficult conversations where you have to sort of still yourself, they're never as bad as you expect them to be. And then the conversations you expect to be completely easy might throw you when somebody reacts in a completely different way. And you can't predict how people are going to react. That's it. That's a key skill for any role, I would imagine. But you can't control people. You can only control your perception and reaction to situations.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what's really nice there is that you weren't afraid to ask, because what's the worst that can happen? They say no. If you don't ask, it's a no already. And the other thing is, I think sometimes I hear sometimes people are kind of scared to take that first job because it's not the perfect job. But as you've just described there, and I myself have experience of, the part-time jobs and things I did as I was growing up, they definitely helped develop the skills that have been very useful to me in later life, like relationship building and negotiating and things like that. So I think don't dismiss those part-time jobs as being unimportant. They're really valuable for developing skills.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess you've kind of shared with us your journey through Chambers in terms of those promotions, but can you just maybe, because that was quite a long time ago, would you maybe give us a sense of what that promotion path might look for somebody today, from junior clerk to practice director?
Yeah, I guess it's changed a little bit over the last few years. So traditionally, for a clerking role, traditionally people didn't necessarily come in with degrees. Now you tend to find a lot of people coming in with law degrees.
Okay.
I think having that background is of assistance, but not absolutely essential. Ideally, if somebody's looking to get into the role of a barrister's clerk, or practice manager, practice director, you would have some sort of law experience, even if it's at GCSE level, or at least started to do some background reading. There's a number of resources out there that that give you a pretty quick guide. It's also worth having a look at the Institute of Barristers Clerks have a website, and you don't necessarily have to be a clerk to be able to join the Institute of Barristers Clerks. I think you can be an associate member, and that gives you access to quite a bit of information. The IBC do quite a lot of regular training, so it's worth having a look on their website. That's quite useful. Not everybody starts as a junior clerk any longer. Traditionally, you generally have to start as a junior clerk to join their profession, but people do come in at a higher level now. I'll often see CVs for practice manager roles where people haven't really got any junior clerk experience, so that's not absolutely essential any longer. Although, from my experience, it's quite desirable to know what the position looks like below yours. It gives you a better understanding of what people are going through. It's nice when I'm talking to junior colleagues that I've trod the same path. I know that it can be tough. I know the challenges. There's the way it used to work many years ago. If you were in the right place and you were liked, you would generally see promotion. Now there's more of a level playing field. There will be, applications for internal roles that are advertised externally as well. So it's not quite as easy to progress as it once was, but there's still plenty of opportunities out there. I often see there's always job opportunities, partly for the fact that so much of what I do is transferable. So there's a number of other professions where they poach clerks on a regular basis. Clerks have become football agents.
Oh, wow.
Lots of them have gone into recruitment or working for expert consultants. There's a number of avenues that people take, and a number of clerks go in to work for law firms in a business development role, and that's just what I've heard of. But there are also a number of other roles people have gone into. There has been clerks in the past that have decided actually they want to become barristers. It's happened on a handful of occasions, but it's not impossible if you've got enough time and you're willing to spend enough time studying. If you've been a clerk for a number of years and you decide you want to be on the other side of the fence, it's not impossible, and it does happen.
Yeah. Have you ever thought about that yourself, or did you in the early days?
It's one of those questions that most clerks will hear on a regular basis when you explain to people what you do. They say, so are you going to become a barrister then? I normally explain that I could if I would like, but I quite enjoy my role and I'm quite happy doing what I'm doing. I don't personally. I don't really have any desire to do that. As I say, I enjoy the variety of my role. I see how draining it can be for a lot of the barristers. Obviously, a lot of them are very intellectually gifted, as you'd expect. I have no doubt you can get there with lots of hard work. But at this stage of my life, I've probably left it a little too late, even if I wanted to. Maybe 20 years ago, I might have rethought, but I'm quite happy doing what I'm doing.
Yeah, and it's nice to know that there is that potential, leap across the fence for those that might want it. Within chambers itself, are there any other, I guess, departments that can be explored? Because I'm just trying to think what other roles might be within a chambers.
Yeah, absolutely. Good point, Joe. There are a lot of other opportunities within chambers for employment that simply weren't there 25 years ago. So as I mentioned before, we were 30 odd members when I joined.
Yeah.
We had 4 clerks, we had a chambers manager, and I think that was about it. We now have a number of fees clerks, and their role is to get fees paid and bill fees and the admin that falls alongside that. We have a HR person that we didn't have until a few years ago. We have a full-time compliance person. We have a data person that crunches our data for us. We have facilities managers, IT, all of these roles that we just didn't have, or most barristers' chambers wouldn't have had many years ago. So there's lots of opportunities there as well. We have a librarian. There is a lot more support staff than we once had. We have a lot of the chambers. So we have a CEO. Her name is Gemma Taggs. She joined us from a law firm. She's been a great success in helping to modernise chambers. But that role wouldn't have been even thought of probably 10 or 15 years ago. And that's a role a lot of chambers have now filled with a slightly different outlook and a lot more strategic thought goes into the operation of many barristers' chambers now, whereas many years ago it was we'll just do the work that's in front of us, and we might take somebody out for a lunch occasionally, and not much other thought went into it. Whereas most of the modern sets will have a business plan in place. They will have strategy meetings. They will have a number of practice groups. It's just modernising and moving with the times, especially when you're managing so many different people as well. It's essential.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much. So, Arron, when you look back on your career journey so far, what's been the high?
The high. It's probably my personal promotions have probably been a high. Us as a chambers deciding to open our Singapore office was a quite a eureka moment. And other highlights, we were awarded the Queen's Award for Enterprise a number of years ago. That was quite something. We had a visit from a royal to come and see the operation and see how things are run. Obviously, as I mentioned before, members taking silk is another high. And just the internal praise from members for a job well done. And some of the members are very good. When you help to secure an interesting case that they've been looking to add to their portfolio or their CV for a number of years, and by my strategic thought process of winning that work has been successful. Those sort of eureka moments that happen on a regular basis. I suppose I could consider those highs as well.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. And when you're looking back again at that career journey so far, what would you say has been the biggest challenge or failure or limiting belief that you've had to overcome?
I suppose stress always plays a part for probably everybody. Overthinking situations and worrying a lot of the time unnecessarily. Just trying to manage those, and I think the key takeaway for the last from my experience is not to take work seriously, but also have a sense of humour about things. It's a journey, and you're never going to finish absolutely every piece of work because it's constantly ongoing, and just accepting of that it is quite important. And it can be quite if you don't get that sort of thought process under control, it can sort of take over for most people in probably all professions. That there will never be a completion, because that's not the way life works. It's a journey, and it's a journey that continues for for years and years. I imagine even on the day I retire, there will still be things professionally that I would have liked to have done that I just haven't had the opportunity to do, or it hasn't worked for whatever reason. But accepting that, and but still being productive every day, and keep chiseling away at success.
Yeah, because I think that's the thing, isn't it? In a client-facing environment, you always want work, because otherwise you have no business. I think that there are expressions like the client is always right, or when the client says jump, we say how high, those kinds of things. But I think, like you're saying, it's really important to be boundaried. Otherwise you could work 24 hours a day and still never get everything done.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's just not realistic. You just need to set, I could, in my role, one of the good things or bad things about the role is that I could be out every lunchtime, every evening, with clients, but there is only so much you can do. And some weeks at particular times of the year, when it's approaching Christmas or before the summer break, things heat up and there is a lot going on. You can potentially, there's been weeks where I've been out 4 or 5 nights on the trot, and that's quite tough, and it's quite tough to balance that with family life. So deciding what is really important and what can be missed is quite key, I think. Because obviously it's a long profession, and I want to be around for a long time, and I don't want to burn out by doing too much now, especially with people in a similar situation, a young family, a wife at home. I don't expect her to do absolutely everything. I need to play my part at home as well as professionally. And there needs to be a bit of give and take, as I've mentioned previously. Part of my role is, international business development, and that can mean, a week or two away from home. So, but on the flip side of that, I need to really prioritize the events that I absolutely have to go to, and the ones that would be nice in an ideal world to go to, or the ones that just aren't really relevant and can be left to somebody else. But it's not always easy.
All right. Arron, I'm really curious about the role of mentors and sponsors on your journey, role models and so on. How have they helped you?
Yeah, so I've had quite a few, I suppose, role models and mentors over the years. Probably mostly so my former senior clerks over the years, Neil Palmer and Brian Lee, have been very helpful at the earlier stages of my career. That they've both retired quite a few moons ago now, but they were quite important to learn from. Very different styles, different ways of doing things, but I think that's great, and I think that's really important in any chambers environment for a clerk's room practice management team, that you have a number of different styles, because not everybody's going to get on with everybody. Some clients really warm to one of them over the other, and vice versa. Different personalities for different roles, and I think that's key. Knowing your skill set and knowing what you're good at and what you're not so good at. A former colleague, once said that not everybody's a striker. You need people to fill every role, and play to people's strengths.
Yeah. It's really funny. I used the football analogy a few weeks back when I was interviewing someone else, and it's so true, isn't it? The team wins. The striker doesn't win on their own. There's a reason there's 11 players.
Exactly. Couldn't agree more. That's right. And it's just, and as a manager of people, which I am, I have a team that I manage. It's just knowing people's strengths and weaknesses is pretty critical. I know some things that might the people that I manage really enjoy doing, and equally I know the things they don't enjoy. So I tend to try and give them a little bit of a pep talk if I'm giving them something I know they really don't like, in advance, without telling them I'm giving them a pep talk, just to sort of try and harbour some enthusiasm, or at least an understanding that this task is important and why it needs to be done. But that's part of managing people, and that's a skill in itself.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. So we've already touched on the, I guess, for people who are wanting to find out more about the profession, you've kindly shared those, the Institute of Barristers Clerks. We'll put a link in the show notes.
Correct.
Yeah.
Great.
And are there any other resources that you'd suggest people go take a look at?
Yeah, if people are interested, there's a number of specialist recruiters in the area. There's a company called Gill Reese, which is headed up by a couple of former clerks, by coincidence. They are well regarded. There's some other people, Chambers people. That's another recruitment company. ABC, some more recruiters there, and Hewitson and Co. are one of the other recruiters as well. So they will regularly advertise jobs within Chambers, and that could be from CEO, practice director, down to the most very junior clerk, and including all of those support roles as well. So it's worth having a look on their websites, and I can provide the links.
Okay, thank you. You touched on that some people are coming into the profession with degrees now, but if people have, experienced the law in some way, that might be enough to get in. So that's helpful. But I'm wondering if you could share with us what soft skills you think make a great practice director or, junior clerk.
Yeah, I think probably the key skill for any role within a Chambers is good time management, and being able to communication skills are absolutely key. So time management, communication skills are probably up there. Good diary management, and day to day, just being able to interact with people, are sort of the regular key skills. Numeracy is quite important. Your written communications need to be on point. A lot of the work we do, unfortunately, it is via email. It can be quite time saving, although it takes away some of the personal touch, and it can be a little bit faceless. But it is part of the job now, just simply for speed. Email is quite key, and obviously if you're negotiating a particularly lengthy deal, you then need to formalise that in writing after the event. And a lot of the barristers' work will be in writing. It's quite rare. They will give oral advice, but it tends to be followed up in writing. Normally informally by email, but generally most clients will want something in writing as well.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. So I'm hearing time management, communication, organisation, good written skills. And then the other things that I've heard throughout the conversation are, I guess, dealing with pressure, negotiation.
Yes. Unflappable, I think, is the term, and I think most clerks are fairly unflappable. Calm under pressure is key, because it can be quite a pressurized environment, and if people are particularly stressed, and it's just having those human interaction skills to know when to leave a barrister alone and to know they're under pressure. It is something you kind of learn over a number of years.
Yeah. Emotional intelligence.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Arron, one of the things that I'm really curious about And this is, as an outsider who just sees it on TV and hears about it in the news, but I get the sense that it's quite a male-dominated industry, barristers, chambers, and so on. So I'm really curious about, how that has changed over the years you've been in the industry and whether we have seen progress with regards to diversity and inclusion.
Yeah, it's a slow process. It is slow. It's something that we are aware of and we're trying to address, but it is still a slow process. The male-female ratio at the bar is still skewed. I don't know quite why there's a barrier to entry. It's certainly something the bar as a whole is looking at on a regular basis. One of the other things is also not just gender related, but also in terms of social backgrounds.
Yeah.
So people coming in from disadvantaged backgrounds, and we're part of a scheme, a charity called Bridging the Bar. A number of chambers are part of it, and we have students come in to see what it's like day to day to work in a barrister's chamber. It's a bit like our pupillage process, and pupillage is basically probably the easiest way to describe it. It's probably a bit like an apprentice style interview for 9 months. So there's a selection process, and once you've been offered pupillage, you're then under the wing of your barrister supervisor, and they rotate between different barristers. And then at the end of the 9 months, a decision is made about whether they're offered tenancy in chambers, offered to become a barrister in chambers.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, that's interesting. So the pupillage is attached to the chambers and a barrister.
Yeah, or a number of
Yeah.
barristers. So we have that, we call them pupil masters.
Okay, I see. Okay, yeah. So someone applies to the chambers for pupillage, and then at the end of their pupillage, that's almost like did they secure the tenancy or not? Yeah.
Exactly. There'll be a number of assessments throughout the year. There'll be advocacy exercises before mock courtrooms, as it were, just to assess their abilities for advocacy, and there'll be opportunities for the barristers to see their written work, and then they'll decide if they're of the right standard to be offered tenancy.
Yeah. Oh, and is it because there just aren't enough pupillages? Is it a supply and demand thing, do you think?
No, not necessarily. No, not at all. It's just the fact that we do this every single year, and all of the chambers most chambers, there's probably a handful that don't look to increase, but we're always looking to increase our number of barristers, partly because obviously you get people retire, or sadly pass away, and we need to keep those new people coming through. So every year we'll advertise pupillage opportunities via a gateway, and all of the chambers have to do the same thing. So it needs to be advertised, and then applications are made, and there's a sifting process, and we normally have 3 or 4 pupils any given year. But there's not a limited number of possible tenancy opportunities. If we get 4 people through the pupillage process, for example, and they're all of the right standard, we will take all 4. So we'll always make sure we have space.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. So progress, but more work to do, it sounds like.
Indeed, yeah. It's a regular discussion, and something we're alive to. As most of the chambers, we're trying to get closer to an equal split, but we're not quite there yet.
Yeah. Well, I love that your CEO is a female, so that's good.
Yes, she's a real inspiration. She's been with us for about 7 years, I think now. Just a different outlook entirely. She comes from a law firm. She's been great in assisting the modernisation of chambers. She's great to work with, and she gets on well with everyone, and she's extremely well organised and very enthusiastic, and any ideas any of the practice management team come up with, she's very supportive of, and that makes a big difference.
Yeah. All right, thank you. So what does the future hold for barristers, directors and chambers, would you say?
We will expand in terms of numbers. I don't think it'll be too long before we're over 100 members, but obviously most chambers are sort of running everybody knows everybody quite well, almost a family type environment. We might lose some of that just because if you're going in excess of 100 members, it's difficult to keep in contact with everybody on such a regular basis. But I think that's the way most of the top commercial sets are moving. So I think certainly expansion. Obviously, we've got our Singapore office that we've had for 13 years now. That continues to grow in size, and I suspect that will grow a little bit more over the coming years. In terms of practice areas, because we cover so many different practice areas, we will often see some practice areas are particularly booming because there's long-running pieces of litigation in that practice area, and then other years they might be slightly quieter, and then you'll have a boom in another practice area. So it's quite good at managing risk, hedging your bets, and a number of our barristers operate in a number of different practice areas, so that helps to maintain workflow. But I think we'll certainly, in terms of outlook, I suspect we will grow in size, as will a lot of the commercial sets of barristers' chambers. And I think we'll just become probably more interactive with members of the public because they are able to instruct us direct. Possibly not in our chambers, but a lot of other chambers will see even more interactions with members of the public rather than via law firms.
Yeah. And I don't get the sense that AI is going to be taking over your job anytime soon.
No, I don't think so. There's been a number of recent cases actually where AI have produced. I think this was people that were acting as litigants in person, were producing documents before the court citing cases. And it turned out that the AI had made up these cases; they didn't actually exist. So it is quite dangerous, and that's happened on a number of occasions now because a number of the barristers have mentioned those situations. But no, I don't think we're in too much danger at the moment. And I think even when AI does improve, which I suspect it will get to a standard where it can do some of the more mundane tasks, it would still need to be checked by somebody qualified anyway, to ensure it's correct. And unless it's very sophisticated, sometimes the time saving won't be as great as people expect. We often see this when we're instructed on cases where somebody's produced a draft document and actually it's almost easier to start again because it's just not in the style that one of our barristers would draft it. And that can sometimes cause some slightly difficult conversations to say, this piece of work that you've drafted isn't quite right and we kind of need to restart it from a different angle. So I don't think AI is going to be too much of a danger for the next few years at least.
Okay, good. Arron, what do you know now that you wish you'd known when you were just starting out on your career?
It's a tricky one. What would I have? I suppose I would have liked to have a better understanding about the trajectory, and probably what would have been useful is to have more conversations with more senior people at an early stage of my career, just to get a real understanding about quite how different the role is as you progress. I think that would probably be the advice I would give to my younger self. Talk to as many people in senior positions as possible, both within chambers, but also, people that work in support roles in law firms, or indeed, any other profession where you're supporting, highly educated, qualified people, and those sort of management roles would have been really useful, I think.
Yeah. And what would you say to young Arron, who was not really sure what he wanted to do and was doing your business GMVQ? What would you say to him if you could?
I'd say let things progress and follow the opportunities that present themselves. That's very much the way my career unfolded. It spiked an interest when I spoke to my friend about the role of a barrister's clerk, and I followed my instincts, and I'm glad I did follow my instincts, and here I am all these years later. So, no, it's been a great career.
Yeah, thank you. Arron, do you have any favourite quotes or inspirational sayings that you live by?
I try not to sweat the small stuff. A day can only last for so long. Very cliche type things, but trying to encourage members of the team and just generally having a positive outlook, even if I don't always feel that positive. I think it's quite important in a management role to try and instill an air of confidence and ability to get things done without looking or appearing too stressed, even if you are having a stress day. It's just having the ability to try and lead by example.
Yeah.
And you might not always feel like doing the task you're doing, but just sometimes pushing yourself through, and just having a focus on the end goal about why you're doing particular tasks makes a big difference.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. So as we move towards wrapping up, Arron, what's your secret to happiness and fulfillment at work?
My colleagues, I guess, and working with barristers that are genuinely nice people makes a big difference. I don't think I could have stayed somewhere for 25 years if I hadn't enjoyed it, or I don't enjoy the people I work with. It's nice now having the opportunity to work at home a couple of days a week, and certainly during the pandemic, it made me realise I do actually like my colleagues. I do actually like my interactions with the barristers and my clients. And those are the things that I really enjoy.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you spend a lot of time at work, don't you? So it's important that you enjoy it and enjoy the people you're with.
Yeah, it makes a huge difference. If I didn't get along well with the people I work with, I just don't know how I would how I'd manage day to day. I just don't think it would be a nice environment to be in. So I've been very lucky over the years that I've worked with some really nice people. So much so that I consider a number of them now personal friends that have left, colleagues that I've worked with before that I'm in regular contact with, and it's nice to stay in touch with those people.
Yeah. Aww. Arron, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I've really enjoyed, just feeling like I've gained so much more awareness of chambers and barristers, directors. So I'm sure that the listeners and viewers will feel the same. Are there any final words of wisdom, support, or encouragement you'd like to share with the audience before we go?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say if you're interested in a career as a barrister's clerk, I would encourage you to do so. It's a very interesting career. I've really enjoyed my time. There are a number of places you can look for information about the role, and equally, if anybody would like to speak to me after listening to this about the role, I'd be happy to be contacted.
Fantastic. Thank you so
Jo,
much, Arron.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much for joining Arron and I today. We really hope you enjoyed the show. If you gained any value out of today's episode, please share it with your friends and like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. It really does help us out. And do get in touch with us if you have any questions, comments or suggestions. We love hearing from you. Until next time, have a think about where in an organisation might suit you and your strengths and values. Is it up front in a sales department? Is it midfield in an operations department? Are you defending in a risk department? Are you in goal in a finance department? Or perhaps you're coaching in a leadership role? Have a think about it. And until then, have a great week, whatever you are doing. Thanks so much for joining us.